These are my parents on their wedding day in a Volkswagen Golf. And Arthur, my childhood dog, riding his Volkswagen Beetle. And this is me in my first car, also a Beetle.
Here in Germany, Volkswagen has been a part of everyday life for families like mine and a pillar for the economy.
It's been the dominant car brand for decades. But now, it's desperate. Its market value has plummeted to lows last seen after the 2008 financial crisis and the Dieselgate scandal. Volkswagen needs to cut costs, and its management has been pushing for plant closures in its German heartland. But VW functions differently from any other car company in the world. It's also workers who call the shots.
Mit mir, Daniela Cavallo, Gesamt- und Konzernbetriebsratsvorsitzende der Volkswagen AG, wird es hierzulande keine Werksschließung geben.
Until now, VW had been locked in a stalemate.
They have tried over years to become leaner and more efficient, but the unions have stepped in and prevented those job cuts.
After the longest collective bargaining in VW's history, unions and management came to an agreement. Volkswagen is cutting jobs, but leaving its plants in Germany open.
But the question that remains, is this a sustainable path for the future?
Experts are skeptical.
This is maybe the final attempt to revive the old model without really going where it's very painful, without really thinking about, are our models still correct? Is our production still correct? Or should we rather go for abrupt but more painful change?
VW's fate could seal Germany's future as a car nation. Coming up on this episode of Business Beyond.
Before we keep going, let's get something confusing out of the way first. There are two types of Volkswagen.
There's the Volkswagen Group, which is a conglomerate that owns 10 different car and truck brands. But in this explainer, we will be mainly focusing on the Volkswagen brand. So the maker of these cars.
Volkswagen is one of the forces that turned Germany into Europe's industrial heart.
The car maker has 10 factories across the country. Almost half of VW's global workforce is employed here.
Volkswagen is a highly symbolic company for Germany. It represents the car industry. The car industry stands for 15% roughly of value added within the industrial sector, which is roughly 25% of German GDP.
Right now, Volkswagen is facing a crisis on multiple fronts.
The brand is struggling with profitability. It's lagging far behind its target.
The European market is underperforming. China is shrinking for foreign brands, and the electric vehicle uptake is taking far longer than people expected. Most companies will say, okay, we need to cut plants. We've got far too many employees. We've got far too many production plants. People are sitting around on their hands not doing anything.
And that's what VW management did. In September, it nixed a decades-old job guarantee for its German workers, and for the first time in its 87-year history, planned on closing factories in Germany, according to the Works Council. The announcement prompted the biggest strikes in the carmaker's history.
But at Volkswagen, it's not that simple. VW functions differently from all of its rivals. It's not just management that has the final say here.
In accordance with a law written just for VW, regional government has voting powers in the company's decisions. Most of the time, they ally with workers' interests and at odds with investors. The state of Lower Saxony has 2 seats on VW's supervisory board. Those, along with the 10 seats given to the labor side, mean workers' interests have a majority. Today, VW workers have some of the strongest organized labor power in the world. Works Council leader Daniela Cavallo has been called the second most influential person in the company after the CEO. Now, she helped prevent the first ever VW plant closures in Germany.
So, how did we get here?
1930s Germany, the country was far from being the auto nation it is today. Just 500,000 cars were driving on its roads. France had 3 times as many. When Adolf Hitler seized power, he set out to change that. He hired engineer Ferdinand Porsche to come up with a car affordable for most people.
But Hitler's car plans needed a car plant and money. To finance the construction of the first Volkswagen factory here in Wolfsburg, he turned to workers' wallets.
The Nazis had confiscated all workers' union offices, uniting them under the German Labor Front. The expropriated union funds collected by the German Labor Front were used as the starting capital for Volkswagen, 50 million Reichsmark. But as the Second World War started, weapons, not cars, rolled off the Wolfsburg factory floors, produced by about 20,000 forced laborers.
A look at Volkswagen's history reveals a company built on extorting its workers, from stolen union funds to forced labor.
When the Second World War ground to a halt, British allies took control of the plant. Again, workers played a decisive role. They cleared the factories of rubble and restarted production. Quickly, the carmaker turned into the symbol of Germany's post-war economic miracle. The Volkswagen, literally translated to people's car, became known as affordable and reliable. By 1955, VW had produced its 1 millionth Beetle. The car was being exported to almost 100 countries around the world.
Läuft über die Hochpässe der Anden, unter der Sonne Ägyptens, zu den Urwäldern Javas, zwischen den Hochhäusern der neuen Welt, an den Gestaden des stillen Ozeans. Überall anzutreffen, allgegenwärtig.
Business was booming and VW was hiring. Perks were meant to lure in more workers.
Like higher wages and sick pay, not a given in Germany at the time. Volkswagen became synonymous with safety and prosperity.
But one question remained: who owned Volkswagen?
Until now, the German government had acted as an interim trustee, but in 1961, VW went public, becoming Germany's biggest company. In the same year, the VW law was passed. It was meant to protect the carmaker against outside influence, like this.
And it did so by mandating that no shareholder can have more than 20% of voting rights, no matter how much of the company they own.
Many VW workers bought shares at a discounted rate, and the German state of Lower Saxony became one of Volkswagen's biggest shareholders, giving it 20% of voting rights. So both the state and workers became ingrained in the new VW structure. This is Hans Wilhelmi, the Minister of Economy at the time.
Besonders erfreulich ist die Tatsache, dass die Arbeiter und Angestellten des Volkswagenwerks Aktionäre dieses großen Unternehmens geworden sind.
The founding families, the Porsche Piechs, eventually became the largest shareholder.
So, based on its complicated history, Volkswagen created its very own brand of capitalism. A hybrid between state-run and family-owned, with special protection for its workers.
Since the VW law was passed, the need for management worker consensus has been a fixture, and so have above-average wages. At 15.4%, Volkswagen spends more on labor than all of its competitors.
They're earning much more than all the other workers around in this country. Even they're earning more than someone working for Daimler, Mercedes or BMW.
During good times, it's a deal that worked. In 2011, Volkswagen Group raked in record profits. And as the company did well, it's not just shareholders who benefited. Workers did too. Wages rose. But now, Volkswagen is struggling on multiple fronts, and its unique form of capitalism has been put to the test. Take electric vehicles, for example. This is its plant in Zwickau, in the east of Germany. In 2019, the production of combustion engine cars here was turned on its head. Now, only electric vehicles roll off the assembly line. The workers at the plant were retained and retrained.
Das Science-Fiction-mäßige ist dabei, dass wir im Grunde genommen einen Industrieroboter ohne Schutzzaun hier im Einsatz haben, so dass wir auch mit den Menschen, die hier ringsherum noch andere Tätigkeiten machen, kollaborieren können. Also der Mensch braucht keine Angst haben vor der Technik.
To produce the software for its EVs, Volkswagen spent billions on an in-house software maker, CARIAD, headquartered in Germany. But VW's plans haven't worked out. In Zwickau, there's too little work for the 10,000 employees. Instead of 3 shifts a day, workers here are currently only putting in 2.
Leider spüren wir auch, dass der Markt nicht so angesprungen ist, wie von uns allen erhofft. Die Fahrzeuge sind nicht so nachgefragt, wie wir es uns gewünscht haben.
But low demand isn't the only problem.
VW's electric cars are pricey. The ID.3 is the cheapest model, but it still costs more than many of its European competitors, just as cheap Chinese cars are rolling onto the European market.
When Peugeot is produced in France, it probably costs 2,000 euros just to produce the car, labor, factory, and all the stuff around it. In Germany with Volkswagen, it's the triple price. And sometimes it costs 5 or 6 times as much.
On top of that, VW's electric cars have become infamous for software glitches.
You get to the car, the keyless entry doesn't work, the car doesn't unlock, you have to use the key to unlock it, which still works, and the app doesn't work.
In a modern Volkswagen, major functions are controlled by the central display.
Jens Dralle's job is testing cars.
So if that is just black, then you can't control the car, major functions of the car. So this is the major issue.
A look at VW's factory in Zwickau shows the carmaker needs to reform. To turn its software struggles around, Volkswagen recently spent $5 billion outsourcing its software production to Rivian, an American company. But when it comes to the money VW spends on its workers, drastic changes aren't in its DNA. After 70 hours of negotiations, Volkswagen management and workers found a way forward without shutting factories.
Ich freue mich natürlich auch sehr, dass wir heute so kurz vor Weihnachten zu einem Ergebnis gekommen sind, dass wir unseren Kolleginnen und Kollegen über alle Standorte auch mitteilen können, dass sie diese Zeit der Ängste und der Sorgen, wie es weitergeht, jetzt erstmal überwinden können, dass es nach vorne geht, dass wir für die Standorte eine Perspektive schaffen konnten.
Volkswagen is still cutting jobs, 35,000 in the next 5 years. But those cuts are meant to happen without terminations, through early retirements, for example. VW has also put its job protection scheme back in place.
This is a very mild outcome, at least in the shorter run, and clearly therefore positive for Volkswagen employees.
Employees like Thorsten Donnermeyer, who has worked at VW's factory in Kassel for 40 years.
Es ist ein Stück weit so, es ist auch unser Werk. Durch die Geschichten merkt man ganz genau, es ist auch unser Werk und wir lassen uns hier ein Plattmachen nicht gefallen.
The new agreement includes other changes. For example, Volkswagen's EVs will no longer be produced in Zwickau. But experts are skeptical.
When you look at the agreement, it indeed looks more like a short-term fix. And I think you can have a lot of question marks behind the question of whether this is sufficient to really bring Volkswagen back on track. What this agreement does it will reduce the cost position for Volkswagen, but not with a sledgehammer, not abruptly, but more gradually.
Volkswagen's deal to protect its workers stays true to its history, but some say it is not staying true to the economic future of the country.
What we observe in the car industry is a process where increasingly car production, so the physical assembly of cars, takes place in other countries more than in Germany, whereas Germany focuses more on research and development and everything related to services within the industry. And I think this trend will continue. And one of the implications is that Volkswagen will not be able to maintain all its production plants in Germany.
While the standoff between management and workers is over for now, pressure for Volkswagen to reform will likely last.